There's some prediction that if we federally legalize cannabis recreationally, not medically, and everybody's going to start have a higher access, alcohol industry will lose billions of dollars a year, and they're very well aware of that. This old logic that cannabis is an entry drug was a lie. It's an exit drug. You start taking cannabis and people lose opioids, benzodiazepines, tranquilizers, alcohol. Once the health gets better, you're like, wait a second, why am I exactly doing that stuff?
As the author of Medical Marijuana, Dr. Kogan's evidence-based guide to the health benefits of cannabis and CBD, he bridges the gap between science and practice, offering patients and practitioners insights into cannabis's role in treating chronic conditions. Dr. Kogan serves as the medical director of the George Washington Center for Integrative Medicine and is a passionate voice for blending traditional and holistic approaches to care. And I just have to say that all of us in our office have read your book. It is a fantastic book. Thank you so much for creating it. And thank you so much for being on the show. Welcome, Dr. Kogan.
Thank you. Thank you. So happy to be here.
Awesome. Likewise. Well, I just kind of want to dive right in because there's a hot topic going on in the medical marijuana space right now, and it's the DEA hearings, potentially rescheduling, marijuana.
Yeah.
And for those, and what they're considering, moving marijuana from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. And just for those in our audience, just briefly, who don't understand the system here. So the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, has a scheduling system for all drugs. Schedule 1 being the highest, 5 being the lowest. Highest means that all the drugs in Schedule 1, for example, would be like heroin, LSD, marijuana, unfortunately, is part of that. Those are drugs that are considered to have a higher addiction rate and having no medicinal benefits, where Schedule 3 has a lower potential for addiction and has medicinal benefits where doctors could prescribe it. So that's what's at stake here for these hearings. And I would just kind of, love to start with kind of getting your thoughts about, these hearings. It really seems that the rescheduling of marijuana, do you think that this kind of reflects or addresses the decades of stigma that's been associated and the misconceptions that have been associated with cannabis? Or do you see this as kind of being more the same?
No, I think there's a shift. I think what happened back in August when head of HHS basically wrote a 200-some page letter to the DEA saying you can't ignore this. You have to approve the rescheduling, and DEA agreed. So the DEA is now officially agreeing with rescheduling. At this point, they're simply waiting for the Congress to do something, right? Because you can't just simply reschedule something. You do have to have a congressional hearing and approval for that. So, in this political climate, it's still going to take some time, simply because, we're in transition in presidency, and who knows how quickly this will get prioritized with the new administration at White House. But the shift is obvious. I don't know if it's because the stigma is less. I think it's simply recognition that, at this point, almost all the states have some kind of a medical cannabis, or even a lot of states have recreational. So at this point, it's sort of like, well, we can keep having this mishmash of complete mess of a system where each state have to come up with their own system, or we can simply say, wait a second, let's just do it once and for all, and kind of simplify and really not just improve an access, but also figure out the logistics on a national level, because it will not only improve substantially access, but it will really simplify everything. I mean, right now, if you're in a state of Florida, for example, but you also have a house, I don't know, in somewhere else on the East Coast, and you have to bring stuff between the states, it's actually you violating federal law if you're transferring it, even if both states have it legal. Let's say you go from New Jersey to Florida and you're driving. It's actually illegal. You can't drive between the cross state lines with this. It's like, but it sort of doesn't make any sense because both states allowing you to use it. Nobody pays attention to this. Obviously, I haven't heard of any legal problems for anybody in many years, maybe definitely more than 5 years. So it's a kind of an outdated concern. And yet, I think on a federal level, if the rescheduling does occur, I think it'll be a big shift. Now, it's not, we kind of talked, you and I talked a little bit about this before. the fact that it's not going to be easy. The big problem is logistics of rescheduling. I mean, once the law goes into effect, now what? Because the law, having it Schedule 3 in contrast to Schedule 1, will require a change in dispensation, because all the dispensaries will have to be either approved as pharmacies, or the regular pharmacies like your CVS on your corner will have to start dispensing cannabis. Of course, they're not ready for that for sure. So, there's a lot of gaps in pragmatic process, and more importantly, there's a big gaps in the regulatory system. Right now, cannabis is regulated as a separate entity, and then once it puts in the Schedule 3, now what? So now you're going to have to regulate this as all other medications. That creates a problem, because actually FDA does not regulate botanicals. It doesn't know how to deal with that. So they regulate them from perspective of, okay, we're not going to pay attention. We're simply going to say it's okay to take, but we're not regulating it for a specific medical problem. Now, if it gets rescheduled, that actually means that there's regulation for specific problems, but they're not ready because there's no precedent. There's no botanicals that are approved for any particular indication. So how is this going to play out? It's hard to say. I'm one of the members of Doctors for Drug Regulation Policy Reform, and it's a kind of an action committee, if you will. It used to be called Doctors for Cannabis Regulation Reform. And, we're basically saying we have to deschedule, not reschedule, because the rescheduling in our minds doesn't go far enough. I think the descheduling will put the cannabis right where it should be. It'll equate it to alcohol or cigarettes. And, frankly, sure, we can discuss about harm, but we should also discuss harm of cigarettes and alcohol. It's not a whole lot less. In fact, in many aspects, I think harm from alcohol is outweighs any harm from cannabis.
Absolutely. Personally, I gave up alcohol about 14 years ago now. And eventually I switched over to cannabis to help some of the problems that the alcohol was causing. I mean, massive inflammation, a lot of anxiety, especially on the next day. Not that I was a super heavy drinker, but when I did, as I got older, it seemed to wear on me. And I tell you what, when I quit drinking, I became more mentally clear.
Sure.
And that was just amazing. And another thing that I find very interesting that you mentioned that too, because, alcohol is such a, devastating, it's actually one of the more addictive compounds on the planet, really.
Sure.
And one thing that we've, seen on our platform here at My Florida Green, with our platform on the Doc app, something like about 45% of our patients report that they quit drinking. They just lose the taste for it altogether.
Well, we know there this old logic that cannabis is an entry drug was a lie. It's an exit drug. There's now even books written about it, right? So that's an exit drug. And, you start taking cannabis and people lose opioids, benzodiazepines, tranquilizers, alcohol. So, it's a multifactorial substance that can fit into so many problems of our health puzzle that once the health gets better, you're like, wait a second, why am I exactly doing that stuff that kind of causing tons of side effects? And you mentioned the sleep with alcohol. I don't know if everybody knows this, but one glass of alcohol and your nighttime sleep is screwed up. No matter how old you are, no matter how strong you are, how big you are, whether you're, 100-pound woman or a 250-pound bodybuilder, your sleep will get screwed up, period. And studies been done about this left and right. And cannabis is actually one of the few things that can substantially improve sleep. Again, studies done, and you look at states like Colorado that's approved cannabis for medical use forever, and they decreased sleeping aids by about 70% in the last 5 years, over-the-counter prescription, just people buying. So, there's also resistance. We should sort of acknowledge this. There is a resistance not based on evidence, but based on who gets paid for what. I mean, the alcohol industry, the drug industry, they're looking at this and it's threatening to them. I mean, there's some prediction that if we federally legalize cannabis recreationally, not medically, and everybody's going to start have a higher access, alcohol industry will lose billions of dollars a year. And they're very well aware of that. So of course they're not like looking at this and doing nothing.
Right. Well, and then you look at also big pharma. I mean, like you said, cannabis fills so many different gaps in what our pharmaceuticals don't cover, or do help but cause other side effects that you have to take more pharmaceuticals for. They would take a big hit too.